Welcome everybody to Project You, Project Me, the FTG guide to self-belief and self-coaching. Why not come along and listen to people like you, people like me, leaving legacies for your future. So welcome to Project You, Project Me, removing your fear in the transition, or ex-forces, or maybe you're a spouse. But we're always looking for a bit of diversity. And today we've got a fantastic Martin Ellis, who I've only met for the first time today, although we have met through LinkedIn, which is a fantastic platform, as we all know. But Martin, it's great to meet you, and it's fantastic to have you on here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've got quite a bit of a background within the military, with this fear and things like that. So just before we kind of go into a question set and talk about what we're going to talk about, can you just tell me a bit about your background and things like that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've not always been in recruitment, so it's about the last 18 years. I've been a recruiter and a headhunter, last 8 of which with the company I work for now, which is Recruitment Southeast.
Yeah.
Then before that, I spent 20 odd years at Rentokil. And that's the relevant experience for me with you, in that we used to focus on employing people that were coming up the forces. And there's a story that goes with that, but there's a summary that we didn't just expect those coming for the forces to adjust to us. We also had to adjust to them. And that's something to explore later. Before that, I was in publishing, marketing, sales. And before that, I was an engineer. I'm a toolmaker by trade.
Wow. Wow.
That's me.
Fantastic. Well, long and distinguished career then, eh?
Oh, now you make me sound old.
Well,
and I'm not distinguished.
Well, I'm not going to say anything about age. I've become a grand dad myself, and I'm over 50 now. So I did go on the golf course yesterday and felt it for 4 hours. So I'm definitely getting old myself. But it is fantastic to have you here. And for those who are listening in, we're going to talk about one of the favorite topics of the Forces Transition Group, which is CV writing and the myths and all the kind of stuff around it. And of course, we could go on for hours and hours. So I've picked 10 areas that I believe are topics. They're quite hot. Some will be small, some will be quite big. But I'm really interested, and we haven't planned this, by the way, everybody, before everyone says you've planned all of this, because I've got no idea what Martin's actually going to say. That he's quite outspoken with CVs, because I've seen a lot of the work that he does. But that's fantastic, because that's what it's all about after all. So I'll tell you what, Martin, I'm going to start with one that I'm always going on about, the 2-page myth. Yes or no? Is it reality?
No. Wow. Have you heard the history of the 2-page, where it comes from?
I've heard certain things, but I'm very open to hearing from yourself.
Well, I understand that it comes from when we had fax machines, and it was expensive to put it through. So 2 pages was cheaper than 3. As a rule of thumb, I think it's a good idea to keep it to 2. But if it gets to 3, not a problem. The thing to remember, first of all, is it's a marketing document. And I think it needs to tell a story, to engage someone. And the thing I love about it as a headhunter is there are no rules. Mm-hmm. So I think writers often get frustrated by that. From a reader's point of view, I can see the choices they've made in terms of not just the content, but the font they've chosen, how it looks, the amount of white space. But 2 pages is just rubbish. It's as long as it needs to be, and it's a marketing document.
Yeah. So my take on it is it's about the individual. Yep. And there's a lot of experience. Some people haven't got an experience. If everybody has to write a 2-page CV and you're leaving school, how are you going to do that? That becomes a really difficult document in 2 pages. But also someone who's got 25, 30 years experience might want to expand onto 2.5, 2 3/4 pages.
Strangely, if I can jump in there, my general advice is when you leave school, your CV should be longer
Roger.
than when you get to the end of your career.
Okay.
I have got my CV down to 743 words.
Mhm.
And I think it should be counted in words, because if you say 2 pages,
Yeah,
you can keep on writing, move the margins, make the font smaller,
absolutely.
squeeze it in, and it becomes unreadable.
Yeah.
So lots of white space. And then as you get older, take out the old stuff. Keep yourself relevant.
Yeah.
It's today that counts, not what you did 20 years ago. So I've got stuff that I'm really proud that I did in the early 2000s, 90s. It doesn't appear on my CV.
Yeah.
Because it's not relevant.
Yeah. Well, we go with about 8 to 13, 14 years maximum, depend on people's postings, because you've got to look at people's careers in the military.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
Stuck in
rule of
one
thumb.
place. So we have to kind of always make it relevant. Interesting about the white space, I talk about that big time. White space, perception, straight away, the early part of the CV, which is kind of the next part I want to come on to. And I think perception is everything. The first thing somebody sees is in reality is what they're going to remember. Very hard to change somebody's mind once they've already seen something that's made up their mind. What do you think about the beginning of a CV then? So I'm talking about white spaces, you know, just let's make it easy. We don't want to make it difficult for anybody because that's what's going to attract the eye. So in that opening piece where there should be white space, what do you think about photos?
No, I'm not a fan for all sorts of reasons. They're a distraction. They can pick up or send a message by default about age, gender, colour, all sorts of things. I think they're just best put to one side. Do you think they should be on or not?
Absolutely not. I think alongside you, they create bias from the very beginning. If somebody wants to work out how you look, then they're probably after the CV then going to start to migrate into LinkedIn and things like that. And of course, they can see all of that. We don't want to create a bias before we even start.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No pictures. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm exactly the same as that. So we're not doing too bad here. We're pretty
It'll come
aligned.
a copper in a moment.
But it brings us nicely onto that first part again. And what I see all the time, for me, it does my head in, is the GDPR feel, the address. Someone's going to write to me kind of thing. I'm thinking, why do you want to put your address on there? I understand the need to put, I don't know, York, if you're sending it to recruiter, stuff like that. But why do we want a full address? I just don't see the need for it. It just adds loads more information that's not needed, and it's just doesn't look that great, and it's absolutely not needed. Who's going to write anyone these days anyway? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, if you put your home address on there, I'm only going to look you up on Google and laugh at your neck curtains. It's your name, and then on the next line, hometown, phone number, email address, and don't put phone number. Just put the phone number. We all know what it is. Email address, and then your LinkedIn link. So that goes across on one line. Name those 4 things on one line. Then like a personal profile, a few words about yourself, and don't even put the words personal profile or the word curriculum vitae at the top. Totally unnecessary. I agree with you. I'm thinking about a CV when it appears on the screen. I want, as a reader, you know, I can get 100 CVs for one job, 100 applications. I'm being selfish. I want to whip through those quickly. I want to see who's got the ability to communicate with me quickly and get keywords up on my screen as soon as they possibly can.
Yeah.
In a bright language and avoiding acronyms. Just get rid of every acronym. Persecute acronyms.
Yeah, that's military people down to a T. Acronym. That's all they live off. Yeah, it's interesting. There is a slight difference in what I do with LinkedIn. Now, you deal with businesses, I deal with businesses, and some of the people who I'm talking to within HR are telling me they will migrate straight to LinkedIn and sometimes don't go back to the CV if there is a link in there. So I suggest to people that we probably want to put LinkedIn on the CV, but can we drop it into the end, if you like, and the link, making sure the link's an actual link and just not a load of gobbledygook that's just in black ink that nobody can actually click on or anything like that. So I've got no problems with the link to the social media platforms there, but I tend to try and keep away from that to allow someone to actually read something first instead of clicking on it, because it is definitely something I do sometimes. I just go and try and find out about the person before I've even read the CV. So some of that's personal to me, but it's also, you know, I'm not saying everybody in companies do that, but we are finding a little bit of that. And if someone doesn't get back to your CV, it might be a problem.
Yeah, I take your point. I'd have it at the top because it makes it look like the individual is at least aware of that as a marketing tool.
Yeah.
And that makes them look a bit more contemporary.
Yeah.
And I will, having said I want to read a CV quickly, I will stick with it.
Yeah.
Well, at least for the first page, and begin to get a picture in my head. I probably won't go to the bottom straight away, if I'm honest. I'll go to the LinkedIn profile, then I'll go back.
Okay.
And if the two dance together, if they tell a story, that strengthens someone's position.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that on board. That's the whole point we're here. I want to work out different angles and things like that. Yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, I get that. Okay. So I like that. And then the other piece was the opening summary, if you want, the profile. I think, me personally, I see the word profile as average. I get a lot of military CVs. I do get some civvy CVs and things like that. And I would say over 90% of them start with the same word. Now, for me, if that means that all CVs are starting with the same word, because I've had over 30,000 of them, then perhaps we're all going to be put in the same pile. It's a bit mundane, the same start. I go with more high level words, especially for people who've been around for a while. A bit like an executive piece at the beginning.
Yeah.
I try to, I have, when I begin my CVs, I call it the communication phase. So when you walk into a room to meet somebody, you don't go, "Hi, I've been in the Royal Air Force for the last 24 years, and can you give me a job now? I'm an engineer." You would never say that, but that's how all service CVs start. They start with "served for." Actually, most readers will never ever know what the hell you're talking about. So you're going in with the wrong kind of beginning. So I look at connection first. So I try to I don't work off a 3-4 liner, though. I extend a little bit to try and get that person to be able to find skills to connect with, but also to allow me to get in the wording that they have written in job descriptions and things like that. Now I know that might be slightly different to you, but I think we're quite we're kind of in the same area.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. I want to see. I don't want to hear that anybody's done 24 years anywhere.
Yeah.
Because it could be 1 year repeated 24 times.
Yeah.
I do want to see their skills.
Yeah.
And I do, on a pretty regular basis, interview people who have got forces experience.
Yeah.
And if they talk about their leadership experience, their communication skills, their technical skills, we're having a good conversation. If someone says, "I've spent 15 years here," especially if they express that as an acronym, I'm quickly turning off. I'm not turned off, but do that another couple of times, and I think, I'm not sure this person knows how to communicate. And all jobs have got levels of communication in them.
Absolutely.
So I think it's skills, and then later on you start talking about the forces in such a way that you reinforce those skills because the training's good. Oh damn, we're agreeing again.
Yeah, what's going on, Martin?
I keep going until we don't. First person, third person.
Could be here for a while though, but I'm with you. Leadership and management are words that every military person is going to use because of the leadership code, sea drills, all the stuff they're taught. I think leadership management are pretty high level words though. They're nearly titles, aren't they? If you say I'm great at leadership, what does that actually say? So what I say to people is the skills within leadership, which will actually drive people, drive teams, drive business, which will ultimately drive profit margins. So I look more on what is it that you're going, how are you going to get that job done? How are you going to complete that mission with this leadership? So we're talking about persuasion, negotiation. We're talking about influence, coaching, mentoring, things that companies are going to need, and things that you can prove through the CV.
Yeah.
So the words at first, but those words then turn into reality as we go through a CV, which kind of brings us nicely on to the next piece. So most service people will write a 2-3 liner, or most CVs I'm seeing, and then they just go, and these are my jobs. Now, for me, we're jumping straight away there from, well, here's a bit of skill, and I haven't told you about me yet. So what I try to do is I try to place an achievement area in. So taking some of the best parts of their life, as current as possible, but sometimes that doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
And then putting those down into areas. So I talk about a story versus an ending versus the skill from the beginning of the CV that we're talking about and where you've proved them. At that point, I then teach people how to search for numbers, to allow the CV to not just be text driven, to allow something to stand out that somebody goes, I'm way more inclined to read that because actually it's more interesting. Don't know, what's your figure on that?
I'm sorry, I'm going to agree with you. So we've got the opening CV should at least have that 4 lines, and then a list of 6 skills that perhaps you expand on. So it might be management, and expand on what management means, what leadership means. And then the next headline should be career achievements or highlights. And that word should appear before the CV drops down the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
That someone needs to just scroll up, and then, because as soon as you've got achievements in, it almost doesn't matter what they are. The reader knows you're thinking about not just the process, but the outcome. And I suspect you've said something like this, exactly like this. I think I'm beginning to realize we've got very similar outlook on this. So in the end, you've got that summary, and you've made yourself interesting enough that someone wants to speak to you. And they don't need to bother with the rest. You're already interesting.
Yeah.
One other thing I would say is that the tone of this. I always promote the idea that you should have a Marmite CV. So if 10 people read it, if 10 people read my CV, my objective is 5 people to love it, 5 people to hate it. Much better than 10 people saying it's okay. Because if 5 people love it, they're likely to invite me to interview. And if 5 people hate it, I won't want to work for them anyway.
Yeah.
So that's done some work for me.
Yeah.
So you've got to get that language in. If I just be extreme for a moment, and I don't mean that everyone should do this, but my 24-year-old son is a software engineer. And amongst his 6 skills, he's got, I can grow a swell beard. And the number of times that people have invited him to interview just to meet the person who put that on their CV. And he quite often gets the job out of it. Now, like I say, I'm not saying he can carry that off because he'll smile through it. And I'm not promoting that you should do it. But it works if you do it right. And you can be a bit extreme. And I see so many CVs, and if I'm honest, particularly when I've got ex-forces, that are so formal. And they're trying to use big words to make themselves look important. No, keep it simple, keep it light. You're a human being. You've got a story to tell. Make yourself relatable. Yeah. Sorry, I'll stop there.
I'm loving all of that. So military CVs are exactly what you've just described. They're all right. They're just all right. That's what they're leaving with, which means when everyone comes to me, and a lot of the things you hear and what happened to me, is that's why you pick nothing up. Nothing gets returned to you. You're getting automated replies and all that kind of stuff because it's just all right. I'm big on this Marmite thing. I didn't used to call it Marmite, but it actually just resonates with everything I'm doing, because I say to this people through cross-pollination over many, many years all see CVs different. So if you can get 5 people to like it and 5 people don't, you're in much better position than somebody who's just got an average CV.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
100%.
I agree with that. That's brilliant. And that, you know, I love the Marmite thing. So you might hear that word being used a bit more, but we're going to look at getting that kind of stuff on our website, which you've kind of kindly said we were allowed to. But layout of job roles. Some people in the military are being taught that you don't write in reverse chronological order. That it's there's all different ways to write CVs, but I kind of say, listen, let's just start with that. If you want to go down different avenues and stuff, I think most employers probably looking for that. What you're doing now, and then let's go back a few years. You know, that's the way that I do it. I keep it punchy, small introduction, clear title with only 3 bullets about what you do in that job. That's what we're talking about. We don't want lists of 300 things. I don't know. What's your take?
No, absolutely. Well, I've got to agree with that, or else I couldn't have my CV being 743 words long. Yeah, keep it punchy. I don't care that you know how to use Word. Everyone knows how to use Word. It doesn't differentiate you. I could ask you that at interview. There are things I'd ask at interview. I want to know the big stuff that you've done. I just want to get a flavour of you. Yeah. I don't want to eat all of you and leave me with enough information that I go, oh, I need to know more. Yeah. Don't put it all out there. And there's all CVs, not just military ones. People keep on putting stuff in. And it just gets longer and longer and more boring and a dull history lesson. And if you're after a marketing job or a sales job or a leadership job, you're proving that you won't get it because you can't communicate. They're just putting on your CV, I've got communication skills, but writing it in such a way that you prove that you haven't, it's going to blow your foot off.
Yeah.
So let's not go there. Let's be a bit bright.
It's the same with people who put efficient in English or something about having a degree in English, and then they've got grammar errors, and you kind of like, how did you get that? But and I'm kind of nearly coming. Well, we are coming to the bottom now, but I've got some kind of the last 4 questions are moving away from, I suppose, what's on the CV. Apart from this one, because every CV I get says references available on request, and I'm like, you don't want to be putting references on there. They want it just loads of space. 2, you're giving loads of people's information away. And if you just put references available on request, what's the point? If they want a reference, they'll ask you for one.
Absolutely.
Why does it need to be on a CV?
Yeah, it goes along with your address, your age, your date of birth, your marital status. I mean, we might have a conversation, I think, about interests, because there's schools of thought about whether you should put your interests on or not. But yeah, references, as a recruiter, I don't care. I'm going to ask for them anyway, so whether you put that on your CV or not, you're just wasting space. Leave it off.
Yeah, so nicely into that interest, as we finish the CV, I tend to finish with quals. So what I call that is theory behind the decisions you've been making and delivering quals that with your experience. So it kind of finishes the CV nicely. I do put a little, for service people, I put an icebreaker in just above the qualifications and education, just to let people know that there maybe have been a longer career, or the jobs that have split are inside one, which kind of usually gets an icebreaker question, which is what hobbies and interests are in many ways. I tend to stay away from hobbies and interests simply because I think it can create bias, just like the beginning of your CV can as well. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I have got interests on my CV.
Okay.
And they are, I avoid golf and gardening at every opportunity. and that always gets a laugh.
Yeah.
And it's at the end, so it's not, I'm not making a big show of it, but it's just a gentle piece of humor, and it brightens it up, just puts a bit of, I think it puts a little bit of sparkle into it, but otherwise I probably wouldn't bother. I don't think it's terribly important. Your point about qualifications is right. Qualifications, professional development, training you've done, that's always good, because again, as a recruiter, if you're saying you've got some management skills, I want to know what you've been through to learn them.
Absolutely, that my point exactly. So it's kind of putting a bit of meat, a bit of theory on, because people will say, I'm a project manager. And you go down the quals and they haven't got a project management qual, and you think, well, how did you make your decisions then? Basically, they've just made them up. That doesn't tell me that you're a great project manager. Where have you got your theory from? Which alignment are you going down? Where's your process?
Yeah, you're right. I think actually for project management at the moment, there is lots of companies seem to want a project manager.
Yeah.
And they sometimes worry that something like Prince 2 might be over the top. And if someone can demonstrate how they manage process, even if it's with a spreadsheet, that usually goes down quite well, actually, in my experience. But that's one that almost sits out on its own. Project and process management. Actually, I think they need sometimes a longer CV. There's a bit of, if you're going to be a project manager, you've got to be good at detail.
Yeah.
So you need to just demonstrate a bit of detail and a bit more care in your CV.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah. Well, I think around about 60% of people I speak to leaving the forces are all going to be project managers.
Yeah.
So, whether they ever get there or not, that's just kind of, many people follow the herd. I think what I try to promote is have a look at everything before you start making up your decisions on your direction, because you know there's a billion things you can do, and because you're in your insular world, if you don't go and have a look, you're going to end up just following everyone else. So what we say is, come and have a look. You might not get a job from what we're doing, that kind of stuff, but I tell you what, it'll open your eyes to what's actually out there.
Yeah. Can I just take one tangent on that? I'm not sure that the forces people, I know you do because I've heard it on a blog, but I think it's worth mentioning, if you weren't going to mention it in a moment, is LinkedIn. And make sure that when you you must have a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
Put your key skills in the headline, the line underneath your name, and in the about section, in particular, on those two, because you won't know what's out there, and people use LinkedIn as a database to find people. I'm sure you've said this, you know all of this.
Yeah.
But the number of people who in Civvy Street who have been on LinkedIn for years still don't know that it's used as a database, and still don't use use keywords and phrases consciously in the important places, which helps them be found for jobs they don't know exist.
100%. We teach all this in brand. So it's different for someone who's searching for a job to somebody who's, you know, I suppose like me or like you, who actually got a job. It's slightly different in the titles, but actually that's exactly what it is. It's a chance for people to come and find you.
Yeah.
And if you put Squadron Sergeant Major in there, there's no such thing in the world in City Street, so no one's ever going to find you. So we look at all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's great advice as well. We should do one on LinkedIn as well. So we'll have a look at that. Perhaps when we do a LinkedIn masterclass, you can come along and give the session. That'd be quite interesting. But coming on to the last three. So this is a question. I get this question every day. ATS. It doesn't exist, John.
It does exist, but I don't think it's the problem that lots of people paint it as.
Yeah.
I sometimes write CVs for people and I will charge for it. That's not my career. I'm actually doing a headhunter. I'm a headhunter. That's where I earn my money. I've seen CV writers justify their existence by overplaying what ATS is and what it does. Don't have lots of pretty colours, don't have lots of columns, because that will confuse an ATS. Yeah. But in our agency, we don't use it at all. It's always read by a human being. Big companies will use it to try, and ATS is set up to find people, not to reject them.
Yeah.
So if it's set up right, and your CV's anywhere near close, it will put it into a pile where a human will read it. So I think it's a bit of a red herring, and not to worry about it.
Mhm.
As I said, too many colours, too many boxes, it might confuse it a bit, but basically ignore it.
Yeah, so just chill out a bit on it. Some of the companies we work with have an applicant tracking software.
Yeah,
What we do with them is say, listen, military people sometimes might not come through me, and you might find that they've written in boxes. They might find that they've got all these things going on. So that doesn't mean they're a bad candidate, though. So what we do is we create a link straight through the applicant tracking software with that business. So with great candidates that we've got, should they choose not to do our CV session and get it in some kind of structure, and they just
yeah.
want to wing it in there, at least it's going through and the company seeing these good candidates, and that kind of works as well. There is some good people who've got jobs in the businesses we work with that probably wouldn't have got through an applicant software when I've seen that CV.
Okay. I mean, my
But
experience is that most companies set them up for people to get through rather than to. Yeah, they
yeah,
want people to succeed because they want to employ people.
well, let's hope so. Yeah.
And 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 to be fair, most CVs that I get off applicants, actually, they're just winging it because it's so easy. So I'd quite like to have something that just got rid of the ones that weren't appropriate. But actually, I also want to see them just in case. So yeah,
Yeah.
don't over worry about it. But your point about what a military CV might look like is well made, to be fair.
Mm. Which brings us something you just mentioned, actually. I'm the same as you. I will charge a small fee if somebody wants me to really do their CV for them. I don't like to do it because I haven't got time. CVs don't just turn up in 5 minutes. Everyone thinks that because you're a CV writer, it'll be done within 50 seconds, and actually it takes hours to do it properly. And there's some kind of interaction has to be with that individual.
Yep.
And some people think, oh, well, I don't want to do all that. You're just going to write me CV. Actually, that's not how it works. But my theory is learn over pay. So what's yours? You know, you're saying you do a few people. Would you say people are much better off to learn how to write CVs by getting a correct education on it, or pay for a CV?
Oh, I think people should try and write it for themselves.
Right.
Because I think it helps you have a conversation with yourself about who and what you are, and it helps you manage your thinking. This is quite complicated, and I won't get deep into it. But people write CVs and put everything on there, and then they get muddled in their heads.
Yeah.
And I find if I write some, I have no emotional attachment to it. So I will just carve it up, and it will be half the length that
Yeah.
it was before. And doing that, often I'll talk to the candidate after, and they'll say how much that's cleared their heads, and they see themselves more clearly.
Yeah.
And I think people should write their own and shouldn't. And if they spent more than a day at it, go back to it the next day and don't add to it, take stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it short, keep the fog in your head clear. It will really help you understand who and what you are, I think.
Yeah. Well, I work with a couple of good people who do exclusive CVs and charge good money for six-figure fees, whatever they want to call it all. They're pretty good at it. And I've got no problem with anybody paying for a CV whatsoever. But I always suggest to service people, listen, you're going to use this, you're young. You might be using this again and again and again. So if you're happy to keep paying money out, then that's fine, and someone else to do it for you, that kind of stuff. But let's have a look and learn yourself.
Yeah, and then the ownership of it.
Absolutely. And ownership's my odd, isn't it? Ownership's the first word that everyone has to do and say it before we go anywhere with them, because if you don't take ownership of your future, you're not going to be able to own your own CV. It's just going to be a nightmare. So absolutely. So, you know, I would say to people, let's learn first. If then that's too much and you think, you know what, I'd rather pay, then great. But choose who you're going to pay, because there's a billion people out there as well. Yeah,
even I would recommend that.
yeah. And the last, let's just finish with this. I get this question, or no, I see a lot of posts on it. People trying to get around the CV, saying it's not needed anymore. So CV in the next 5 years, extinct or not?
No, more important.
Wow.
The wonderful thing, I know you've got LinkedIn, and a few years ago I said that LinkedIn would take over the CV.
Yeah.
What a CV does from my perspective is I can see, as I said earlier, the decision that a candidate makes about layout, style, font. It shows me a lot more of them than they realize. If you've got a LinkedIn profile, it just says fill in this space, and it does all the look, the sense, and the feel for you. You just put the words in.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
If I look at a CV, so for example, if I see a CV with the margins turned out, so thin margins down the side, and it's written in Times New Roman, I can almost guarantee you the owner of that CV is a 55-year-old bloke. Almost every time. And I've talked to other CV writers about it, and it's a consistent thing.
Yeah.
And it's those things. It's like the lack of white space. It tells me something about someone. And if they're going into a role where communications and writing is important, show it on your CV. That really would help your application. You don't get that choice with LinkedIn. So I think CV is for me, and it's a very selfish point of view, I'm not just looking at what it says, I'm looking at everything. Look, feel, space, sense, communication, brightness, energy. Yeah, CV for me every time.
Yeah. You've always got to look at, I mean, you can bring all the processes in the world in, but ultimately your company's still got to read something.
Yeah.
Or listen to something. They've got to do something to get the candidate. So there's got to be something there. And I just believe the CV will always be, there'll be changes. The CV is always going to be there. It has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are no rules, and it sort of evolves, but they're just so good because people can make it look and feel and read as they want. They're in control.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you with the Times New Roman as well, because military people, because of GSP 101, they have to write in a certain way because of policy, and they write in Arial, which isn't a million miles away from what you're talking about. So I get them all to change it to things like Calibri, where there's a bit more space, and it actually looks so much clearer, like as if your grown-ups written it. You know, not Johnny Age 5 where it's crayon and stuff like that. And of course, that's actually one of the problems. It's an interesting point, that, man, because the way military people are forced to write because they have to, and I get why the military would do that. I suppose just the same as where everything's the same on LinkedIn. Everything's got to be the same in the military. They will indent bullet points. They'll indent and indent, and you're just wasting all of your space. It might add a tiny bit of white space, but it's actually wasting so much.
Yeah.
You know, you're probably looking at about 2 to 3 paragraphs worth of space wastage on a CV. And some of the CVs I see, they don't just indent once. Sometimes they indent twice. So half the pages, the left-hand side's got no writing in it or anything. It's just white. It's just nothing there, and you just think.
I have to say I've never noticed, but you've got much more experience than I have. Yeah, that's all right. Just stepping back to something you said about LinkedIn though, the language that most people, not forces people, most people use is still very stilted, boring. And as soon as I come across a profile that has a little touch of brightness about it, someone had on theirs, I can nip fog and push water uphill. I read that LinkedIn profile because someone's just, you can do that. You can just be a bit light. And so you do
Life.
have choices.
Yeah. Well, we all want to be have a little bit of that. Makes us more interesting. If we're all the same,
Absolutely.
that's probably one of the problems. And military people have never been taught brand. Many of them will have a platform, but none of them have ever used it. It is getting better though. So what I see with military people, what used to be 3-4 years ago was a very grey banner, rubbish pictures, no idea. Now I see a lot more colour. Everyone who comes through me will now have banners, but in a realistic way. So you no point putting a picture of your dog licking your face and across. You know, we want to try and relate ourselves to where we're going, and we do all that kind of stuff. But that is improving. I'm not saying it's just the FTG. There's some other good people out there really doing some good stuff, but I think one of the things is the military are getting away with a hell of a lot here, because there's all these people creating all this stuff for people. Someone else is actually getting the money for it, which is you know, the people who run, you know, the career transition partnership. That's just such a strange thing, because most people are coming through everyone else. That's how they're actually really getting their future, because people like me aren't doing it for them. I'm saying, listen, I can guide you, but what it's going to take is going to take you to do it. And as soon as you tell people that, they start kind of moving forward pretty quickly. I use 2 words: sleepwalker versus hunter.
I've seen that. Yeah. And I get it entirely. Yeah.
It just wakes people up like that. And you can be a hunter for 5 minutes or 1 hour, but if you make that continuous decision in your head to be a hunter every day for a small period of time or a long period of time, it soon starts to set in there, and you wake up thinking about that, and that's your future.
Yep, absolutely. It does. It spins out.
But Martin, do you know what? It's nearly an hour. How
You're
can we talk
joking.
about a document in an hour? That's, you know, it's nearly ridiculous. But I think what it'll do is, once this has gone out, we'll have a look at, you know, I'm sure loads of people are going to watch this or listen to it. So we'll do some other stuff if you're happy to do that. And
absolutely. Yeah.
I would welcome you with open arms to come onto the online job fairs, and we'll work on that and get you on. Probably, I think we're going to get you to watch the one in June. You can tell us what you think, and then get you one in July, and give everybody the opportunities that you can bring to them.
Thank you. And I'd love to do that. Your enthusiasm is very infectious.
And it's very kind of you to say so. And I would implore anybody to get in touch with you. I bet you will open your arms to many people, and I'm sure you do. So for those who are looking or want to see some good content, and maybe have an opportunity of getting a job role and stuff, get in touch with Martin. I would be doing that. I love your content. It's outspoken, but it's relatable. It's reality. Some people are not going to agree with it, just like I don't agree with some things, and you won't agree with some things with me. But that's what it's about, after all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, I just want to finish with a thank you on behalf of everyone from the forces, spouses, ex-forces, and Blue Light for coming along, because I know how busy you are. I look really forward to, you know, moving forward with this and seeing how we grow in the future, Martin. But thanks very much. It's very much appreciated from myself personally as well. I wish you a great weekend in this beautiful sunshine.
I have a beer in the fridge with my name on it, but thank you as well, John. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Take care.
Right, and you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Project You, Project Me. Thanks for listening in. But remember, we have a Project You, Project Me guide to self-coaching, to self-belief, and it can all be downloaded on our website. We also do the 5 fundamentals: CVs, professional writing. We do brand, we do CPD, making sure you're going in the right direction. We're also looking at your elevation, giving you 2 times the chance to set up your interviews before your first actual interview. And also we look at your financial plan, massively important for your future, for you and your family. So why not come along? Have a look. What you got to lose? It's all free. Stay safe.